First story. My friend had an affair. Her stepson caught her and blackmailed her for sex, so now she's sleeping with him too. Basically what the title says. My friend Sabrina, who's in her mid-30s, married her husband Dave, 44, 10 years ago, and got together 14 years ago. They met when she was 22-ish. At that point he had 3 kids. The oldest was 5, Dylan, the middle was 3, Elsa, and 1 recently born, Jordan. The mother of Dave's children, Emily, died in an accident before he and Sabrina met, but her parents took care of the kids a lot at the beginning of their relationship. Since I've always been so close to Sabrina after befriending her in college, I met all her stepkids soon after she started dating Dave and continued to see them all regularly. The kids were cute, and Dylan was positively cherubic. He was a delight, a sweet, gentle, sunny, and considerate child who seemingly had a high amount of empathy, showing kindness to everyone who interacted with him. He was the one who most resembled his mother, with jet black hair and blue eyes, whereas his siblings looked like Dave, blonde-haired and brown-eyed. Dylan was adorable and took a shine to Sabrina immediately, and she absolutely loved him. His sweet nature didn't last forever though. Sabrina described it like a switch had flipped in Dylan overnight, and he seemed to have changed. Almost like he wasn't the same child anymore. Sabrina cried about him nearly every time we met up, and it upset me too. How that angel of a child had suddenly become so sullen, hateful, and cruel. Pretty soon, Emily's parents stopped taking care of Dave's kids and moved out of state, something that shocked everyone. Sabrina and Dave both suspected it was because of Dylan. Dylan got expelled from many schools due to misbehavior, mostly violence. He was bullied for a while for whatever reason, and that enraged him. He'd start fights with the other kids constantly, which several times resulted in the other person needing hospitalization. He'd torment teachers and students with messed up, well-thought-out schemes, commit truancy, break into cars, vandalize things, you name it. Sabrina tried her best to show him all the love and nurturing she could and went out of her way to spend time with him. They'd go out, play video games together, and seemed to have an alright relationship. She had a good upbringing and wanted him and the other 2 to have the same. Even though he would still be somewhat nasty to her, he wasn't nearly as bad with Sabrina as he was to the rest of his family. While he grew up, he became popular in school as he got older, and was well-liked due to his charisma and talent in sports, even though he wasn't a nice person. After he broke into and stole the principal's car, a Merc, taking it for a joyride and torching it, he landed himself in juvenile detention for 6 months. When he was released at around 13 years old, Dave became extremely heavy-handed with him and eventually sent him to military school after he rebelled. The final straw was when Dave found out that Dylan was involved in the street outlaw scene to earn money, even though he was well under driving age. Sabrina wasn't happy about him being sent away from his family, but he still was. There was plenty of drama in the beginning, but he eventually settled down and proved to be incredibly intelligent. Dylan thrived in such a strict environment and became disciplined and extremely hardworking during his time there. Sabrina wouldn't stop ranting about it when he was made first captain, a title recognizing academic excellence and leadership skills within his academy. He visited a few times a year and came home when he graduated at 15. That was around 4 years ago. Since then, Dylan has joined the National Guard and is in college for engineering, an extremely ambitious and high-achieving student. He attends college a few hours away and comes home occasionally to see his family, but his priority is his studies. Sabrina would have liked to see him more. She loves all her stepchildren but has a soft spot for Dylan after everything he'd been through. She talks about him a lot and is very proud of him. The past 6 months or so have been stressful for Sabrina though. Dave's been coming home late and has been strangely cold with her. She's never had to deal with anything like that before, and it has been hard for her to navigate. Sabrina doesn't work. She's never needed to since Dave comes from money and owns a successful business, but she does volunteer. That's how she met Mike, 42M. She volunteers at a hospital since she'd studied health in college, and Mike's a nurse there. She would talk about him to me a lot, about how handsome and kind he was, how much they had in common, but he is also married, so she knew not to cross that line. One night after a particularly bad fight with Dave, she went for a walk and phoned Mike, who picked her up and they went to a bar. She didn't have any motive when she agreed to see him, but they ended up going to a hotel and hooking up, beginning an affair. This went on for a few weeks. I didn't necessarily agree with her actions, but knowing the person Dave was starting to become, I can understand. Sabrina was careful, but not careful enough. She and Mike went to her house the other week as the kids weren't home and Dave was out of town for the night. Unfortunately, though, Dylan had come home from college a few days early and caught them. His smile dropped so fast when he saw what was happening. He was shocked and didn't say anything, just left the lunchroom where Mike and Sabrina were having sex and took off in his car to go to his girlfriend's. She texted him, pleading with him not to say anything and told him that she'd stop seeing Mike. Dylan was dismissive and barely responded. It's not as if he even likes his dad much and their relationship wasn't good. He was far closer to her, so to Sabrina it looked like he wouldn't care, and in a way she was right. This is where it gets messy though. When Dave came home a day later, he threw a party to celebrate the expansion of his company and invited his colleagues, family, friends, Sabrina's parents, who I'm also quite close to, and myself. Dylan had arrived earlier than me with his girlfriend, a very pretty Christian girl called Ella, and he was acting strange by the time I'd gotten there. He wouldn't stop staring and smirking at Sabrina, who seemed very uncomfortable. Sabrina was always very positive and happy, so it was extremely noticeable when she wasn't herself. While Dave was flirting with various people, including me, Sabrina busied herself with kitchen duties and tidying. Dylan began following her around. When I went to the sunroom to escape Dave, I was approached by Maxine, Sabrina's mother. She told me that she saw Dylan saying something to Sabrina in the hallway beyond the kitchen as he had her pressed against the wall. She was crying and it looked like he was threatening her. Dylan had always scared Maxine, so she left without saying anything to come get me. I agreed to find out what was going on. I eventually found Sabrina sitting by herself outside, staring at the pool, her face red from crying. She seemed surprised and told me to go back inside. She just needed a minute. I sat down and gently told her what Maxine had seen, and that we were worried about her. She began crying again and said that Dylan wasn't threatening to hurt her, quite the opposite, in fact. He knew that Sabrina would be in trouble if his father ever found out about her affair, and Dave'd 100% divorce her. Sabrina met Dave just after finishing college and had never worked aside from a few months at a milk bar when she was 17. So the thought of being single with no prospects made her panic. Not only that, I loved her but can still admit she, although not exactly unintelligent, was one of the most naive people I'd ever met. Her life was comfortable and the house she lived in was huge. Even though she wasn't happy in her marriage, she didn't want to give up the life and family she loved. Dylan was sweet to Sabrina, always happy to see her, but his attitude toward her had shifted since catching her with Mike. Pretty soon after arriving that evening with his girlfriend, Dylan pulled Sabrina aside and bluntly told her that if she wanted him to keep quiet about her affair, she had to have sex with him. She immediately felt sick. Dylan was like a son to her, and she thought he must have been joking, but he wasn't, and seemed to enjoy her reaction. She told him how wrong and borderline incestuous it was and that he was beyond smart enough to realize it, but all he did in response was grin and nod at her. Dylan said that while Dave was in the next city over for the coming week, and Elsa and Jordan were staying with their aunt interstate, Sabrina needed to spread her legs like she was already in the habit of doing and let him do whatever he wanted to her in exchange for his silence. She became flustered and pushed past him, but he continued to torment her throughout the night. He'd watch her lustfully, brush past her while they were close to his girlfriend to say vile, sexual things in her ear, and text her while she was in the bathroom trying to get away from him, begging her to send him suggestive photos of herself. What Sabrina's mother had walked in on was Dylan telling her she could never escape him, and something along the lines of he was going to have her even if he had to rape her. Sabrina was lucky Maxine had left when she had, otherwise she would have seen them kissing, among other things. I was surprised that Dylan would want to look elsewhere and risk losing the seemingly perfect Ella. But Sabrina's edit made sense since Ella was his first girlfriend, one he quickly got after his father commented on him never dating a pastor's daughter and a very devoted Christian. Didn't take much to read between the lines. I imagine that this might have been a calculated decision on his part if he had feelings for Sabrina, but held my tongue. Another odd thing was how he'd do all this so audaciously and run the risk of being caught, particularly by his girlfriend, and she said that he was the sort of person who'd delight in that risk. She knew him and what he was capable of, and she was terrified. I asked her if she wanted me to talk to him for her, and she said I'd only make it worse and that she'd handle it. The way her voice faltered concerned me, and I wanted to know if she was considering giving in to Dylan and sleeping with him. Looking visibly sick, she said she was. Nothing I did seemed to convince her to reconsider. She was resigned, so I assured her I was there to support her. I was alarmed about the whole rape thing, but she promised that it'll be consensual. Since Dave had a vasectomy after Jordan was born, and Mike had one too, contraception wasn't something Sabrina ever had to worry about, so I also warned her to be careful not to become pregnant, otherwise everyone's fucked. She opened her eyes wide in fear as the realization dawned on her but said nothing, just nodded. While we were talking, Dylan had been blowing up Sabrina's phone, demanding to know what her answer to him was. She told him she'd agree to it only if he'd leave her alone for the rest of the night. He immediately stopped texting her and kept his distance. I gave Maxine some excuse about an argument with Dave causing tension between Dylan and Sabrina, and she bought it. At around midnight, people started to leave, and I stood on the doorstep with Sabrina as Dave wished everyone well and watched them drive away. Dylan, Ella, and I were soon the last ones there. Dylan asked Dave what time he'd be leaving the next day, and after he told him midday, he looked at Sabrina hungrily and said he'd be back after dropping Ella off to help her tidy up. Sabrina stiffened but tried not to react too strongly. Dylan noticed this and approached her, hugging her warmly and saying maybe they could watch a movie on the couch like they used to. Sabrina seemed to be trying to stop herself from crying. He gave her an intense look, told her he loved her and kissed her gently on the cheek before whispering, "Or you can just fuck me on it." Luckily I seemed to be the only one who caught that as I was standing right next to them, and I was shocked that he could be so brazen while being literal meters away from his father and girlfriend. Ella of all people noticed Sabrina's tears and asked her what was wrong, and she responded by wiping her eye with her sleeve and saying she just really missed him. Dylan put his hand on her face and said he missed her too. He sensually stroked her lip with his thumb, a quick action that was missed by everyone except me, and leaned into her, saying he'd see her real soon. After watching Dylan's black truck tear off down the driveway, we went inside to be annoyed at the situation some more. Dave went to bed as he had to be up early and said goodnight before going upstairs. I told Sabrina I was confused because she'd said Dylan wanted to do things with her while Dave wasn't there. She was too, but it came as no surprise to her that he'd push it like he did in front of the others to see how she'd react. We waited in the lunch room, where Sabrina shifted nervously. Pretty soon she got a text from Dylan, which read, "I'll be home soon. Wait for me in the family room." You're going to enjoy tonight, I promise." A few seconds later he sent, "Your boobs look great by the way." Sabrina became really anxious, standing up and beginning to pace. I asked her if she wanted me to stay, but she shook her head and asked me to leave. Before getting into my car, I told her to be safe and to call me if she needed to. I texted her when I got home. Sabrina responded she was okay and she'd call me in the morning. She called me late the next morning, around 11:30 a.m. Something seemed different about Sabrina. It was odd. She sounded almost airy. By that time both Dave and Dylan had left and she was by herself. I asked her what happened and if she was okay. She told me when Dylan got home they cleaned up the kitchen and spoke on the couch for a bit before putting on a movie like he'd suggested. Dylan moved closer and closer to her and asked to cuddle her. Besides kissing her on the neck and making it very obvious to her that he was hard the whole time, he didn't try anything else while they were on the couch. She said he smelled so nice and got very uncomfortable when she realized she was becoming aroused too, and told Dylan she was going to bed. He said okay, but he'll give her a choice. He can either fuck her in her bed, the one she shares with Dave, or in his room, which happened to be right next to the main bedroom anyway. She pleaded with him, bringing up that he'd said they'd start having sex after Dave had left, and would be willing to do it anywhere but those two places. He raised his eyebrows at her and shook his head, and she realized she was at his mercy. They argued as they walked around the house, and she told him she hated him and hit him several times, something she wasn't proud of, but he was getting under her skin. While crying, she eventually agreed to sleep with him in his bedroom, and they did it. When he was finally done with her, she went to bed, where she cried herself to sleep. She was shamed, not because she felt bad for cheating on her husband, but because of how much she enjoyed herself. Dylan had left by the time she got up at 10, and Dave was getting ready to leave. Sabrina asked him where Dylan went and he gave some nonchalant reply about picking up his girlfriend and taking her to the movies. She felt annoyed at how he was treating them both, and was surprised he hadn't tried to contact her at all. She hoped that maybe he'd woken up to the fact that what they did was wrong. However, he texted her soon after Dave left, saying, "I'll see you tonight, wink, wear something pretty. By the way, I know you loved what we did. You tell me how wrong it is, but I've never made anyone come as hard as I made you last night. Oh God. I can't get that look you were giving me out of my head. I'm always right, aren't I?" Sabrina hated herself for it, but part of her felt relieved he wanted to continue. She couldn't wait to be alone with him. Even so, something else bothered her, and she texted Dylan, asking him to buy her a plan B while he was out. He didn't respond. Even though Sabrina doesn't have no here, she agreed to write what has happened and will happen from her perspective. I might post it here, might not, I don't know. My 36-year-old friend got railed by her 19-year-old stepson after he threatened to expose her affair to his dad. She loved it. Second story. What would you do if your significant other said relationship is over? If you ever watched porn? I shouldn't have used the word ever. I meant from this point forward. This isn't about if the effects of porn are legitimately reason enough to end a relationship. This is about your response to the demand. I am not asking if such a demand is reasonable or has merit, just asking what you would do if you were on the receiving end of such a demand. Personally, as someone who occasionally watches porn, few times a month I'd leave a person who viewed the relationship so disposable. Of course, porn addiction can be devastating to a relationship. This post isn't really about porn but rather about ultimatums. I think I went with porn because of the number of posts I see about people willing to end relationship after finding out that their significant other has watched porn. It's not unusual for this decision to be made without even having discussed the issue prior to the discovery. Some people allow this knowledge to completely redefine the opinion of their significant other. Several posts where people have said I loved him so much, he was the perfect man, but now I'm leaving. This is frequently followed with dozens of comments encouraging the woman to end the relationship, even if there was no previous discussion on the matter. My thoughts is that the significant other is considered disposable in these instances, and it's in his best interests for the relationship to end given how little it took for him to be dumped. Update. If your significant other asked you to wear a cock sleeve, would you? I would if it made her enjoy sex more. Disclaimer, I don't have a small dick, so don't come at me with that shit. I mean, it's not huge but well above the statistical average. But who cares which your size is? Why not focus on making sex enjoyable for her? Yeah, I assume you can't feel anything wearing one, so I assume she'd let you take it off when it was your turn to have fun. Update. I think my wife cheated, but I can't prove it. My 35M wife, 35F, has been very sketchy recently. Several years ago we used to be in swingers, but then she became a teacher at a local middle school and we both agreed it needed to stop. Also, I had really started to lose interest in the lifestyle. Not sure this is even relevant, but thought I'd mention it. Since this January, her behavior has changed. All of the normal stuff, reduced sex drive and lots of time on her phone. Plus she had a male co-worker that she frequently talked about. Apparently he's very funny. She was going out on Fridays after work about twice a month and not returning home until after midnight. This bothered me as I felt it was unsafe for her to be out so late. She claimed that she was fine and they just liked to hang out. I didn't mind her going out as occasionally I did the same with my friends occasionally, but always home before midnight. I had mentioned that I would like to go to one of these get-togethers. However, she said spouses haven't attended and she would find it weird. I knew that was stupid as who cares, and her parents could keep our kids for the night. The next week, a month ago, I just showed up anyway. She was sitting next to this male co-worker and two other teachers had the husbands with them. While I was there, Brad and my wife barely even talked. Odd given how much she would talk about him. FYI, Brad is not even attractive and he's a teacher. I make way more than this man. I can't understand what she sees in this guy. By comparison, I am moderately attractive while Brad is maybe a 5 out of 10. He must have an amazing personality or a huge dick. I don't know. The whole thing wrapped up around 9:30 p.m., not 1 a.m. All very sketchy. At that point I was convinced something was going on. The next day, I checked our phone records and they were texting frequently every day, 5-20 times a day every day. I ended up confronting her and asked to see her text messages. I didn't tell her that I had checked our phone records. She said I was being paranoid and showed me. Their chat history showed only a few text messages per week despite the fact that he was above me on the list and I had texted her that same day. At that point I am 100% positive something was going on. Again, I didn't tell her what I knew, but I told her that I wasn't cool with her relationship with Brad and I had some thinking to do. She told me I was being crazy and then I slept on the couch. The next day, she let me know that she would stop associating with him unless it was strictly work-related. I didn't believe her. I then hired a PI to track her when she went out, but she hasn't gone out again for the last month. Ultimately, I'm at a few $1,000s I paid the PI since she's behaving herself. Now she's returned to her pre-affair self. Unfortunately, I can't prove she cheated, but I'm 99% certain she did. I'm leaning towards divorce, but we have kids and again I can't prove anything. I'm still sleeping on the couch, which really upsets her. She has initiated sex on several occasions, but I haven't been interested. She told me she would transfer to a different school if that would help me calm down, still claiming that I'm being crazy. We live in an at-fault state, so not being able to prove anything really sucks. People keep asking me to update them. I may post again eventually, but I don't want to track everyone down to let them know. I'm going to speak with a lawyer and look into divorce and what I'm risking during the process. I'd rather live on the couch than only get my kids every other weekend. Third story. I, 24 am, realize that I am the problem, but it's too late. Over a year ago, I had the fortunate chance to meet an amazing person who was filled with nothing but love and dedication. We used to work at the same job and that's how we met. We immediately hit it off and started dating. Things started out amazing. She very quickly turned into my best friend, and that's not something I've been able to say about anyone in many years. Even now I can confidently say that she was a gift among gifts. I'm so proud of the person she is and the lessons she has taught me. I just regret how I learned them and the fact that she got hurt by my actions before I realized. I think it was from insecurity, but I cheated on her. I immediately told her out of regret, and because she is the amazing person she is, she took me back. The relationship continued and I tried to be a better person and things went back to normal. She eventually had to move out of state to live with her mom, and I told her that long distance is too hard for how young we are, and so the relationship ended. It's not that I didn't want to be with her, but I was afraid I would hurt her. Unfortunately, that's what I ended up doing. A few months after she moved away, I ended up sleeping with someone else, but this time I lied about it. Some people might argue that we weren't in an official relationship, but she would visit me every month, and we would sleep with each other and go on dates every day. So sleeping with someone else again is something I should not have done and lied about it on top. Even after this, she still wanted to be with me, and over the next few months, she felt less loved and not heard anymore, and I agree with her. She would bring this up, and I would say yes over and over without truly hearing her and putting in enough effort to make her feel secure and loved. So she broke up with me and it shattered me. Even then, she still wanted me in her life and wanted to get back together when we are both in the space to do it. But after she broke up with me, I turned into an ugly, petty child. I would start arguments and say hurtful things for no reason other than my own insecurity. I was toxic and not worth all the love she put into our relationship. I realized all of this too late. I eventually learned that she had started seeing someone new, and from what I was told, there was overlap in our relationship. This hit me hard because we agreed that if we started seeing someone new, we would let the other person know, and she lied to me about this multiple times. Now, instead of talking to her about it, I turned even uglier. I tracked down her ex, and he told me things that really did make me feel like she cheated on me. And after that, I went on a crusade and just started telling everyone that she cheated, and that she's a serial cheater and dater. Doing all of this really hurt her. The friends I introduced her to cut her off, and I know that affected her. I am a monster for what I did, and she didn't deserve any of it. She had every right to start seeing someone new, and even not tell me about it, seeing how I lied to her. I was not only lying to myself, but to everyone who would listen, and spun this story to make myself look like the victim. This eventually got back to her, and that's when I lost her forever. After some more time had passed, she sent me a letter calling me out on everything, and something clicked. I realized that I'm in denial, that I need serious help. I realized what I had done and was disgusted with myself for my petty and hurtful actions. She was my best friend, and without her, I would have never been able to admit to myself that I need to change, or I will never be happy. I just regret that she got hurt by me before I was able to face myself. Now I've spoken to my therapist and started getting evaluated by a psychiatrist. I've even gotten my first prescriptions. I don't want to be this kind of person, and I'm ashamed of myself that I am. I've avoided this for too long, and in doing so I've lost the best thing that will ever happen to me. I was not ready for someone as wonderful as her. Every nasty thing you're typing out, I've said to myself 10 times over. I know how horrible I am. I share this not to seek sympathy, but to admit my faults and emphasize the importance of seeking help when you need it. I'm committed to becoming a better person so I never hurt anyone like this again.